Welcome, everybody, to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. I'm Tom Holt. I'm a professor here in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, and I'm also the director for the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training. And I'm here with my two excellent co-hosts, as always, and I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
I'm Rachel McNealey. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Criminal Justice and an associate with the Center here at Michigan State.
Hi, I'm Taylor Fisher. I am a postdoc here at MSU, and I too am an associate with the Center for Investigation and Training.
So today is going to be a great episode. We've got an excellent guest with us today. He is Asier Moneva. He's a researcher at the Netherlands Institute for the Study of Crime and Law, and he's also at the Hague University of Applied Sciences. And he is an excellent cybercrime scholar. We're going to have a great discussion today. And if you've never listened to the podcast before, our purpose is to try to link the academic research community around cybercrime with policy and practice. Basically, take away some of the confusion that might exist. We're going to talk about things that maybe you've never heard of, maybe you're very familiar with, but give you different takes on different issues and try to connect the two different areas of both policy, practice, and theory and research all together. And today's guest is a really good way to help us think about these issues. One of the things that Asier has studied in the past and does quite a bit of work on is experiments looking at hacker behavior. And I know we've talked about hacking on some of our prior podcasts, but we're going to take kind of a different angle today. And one excellent way to think about this is with online gaming. I don't know, do either of you play anything online?
I do.
I do not. I like to play my little solitary games.
Yeah, I will say after the pandemic, I became an Xbox fan and have learned to play Fortnite and Battlefield and all sorts of things I can take my aggression out on.
Nice. I play Call of Duty Mobile.
Okay.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man. I really enjoy it.
I did not know that about you.
I had to dial it back a little. Now I'm more like now I'm more on Uno, which is also online and competitive.
Yahtzee, online Yahtzee.
Can you throw eggs in Yahtzee?
Like real eggs?
Yeah, in Uno, people are constantly throwing eggs at one another.
I can't say I've ever seen that. But...
Tom, are you getting bullied in your online games?
Well, at first when it happened, I was like, just let it go. And then after a little while, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to throw eggs at this person. So it really is fun. It's kind of a nice way to get your aggression out at your teammate or when somebody really hits you with...
And this is like the card game.
The draw four.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, and you can stack. So by the time it gets to you, if you're like the one who gets 16, everybody's getting eggs.
Incredible. That's fantastic.
Love that.
But yeah, no, online gaming has become a pretty consistent part of my life. I would not have expected it to maybe 10 years ago. But I've certainly been exposed to a lot of different types of people. And a lot of different types of cyberbullying, quite frankly. You know, you get kind of used to people saying mean things, and especially when you're on a team with other people and not performing, and they really let you hear it. So,
Now, would you ever go so far as to take a server offline or really go after somebody?
If I had the capability to do that, I might think about it. No, I don't think so. But I have heard of it. I mean, Fortnite specifically, the platform has a lot of... what's it called? Like creators, right? Like you can create your own sort of sections of it. And I would imagine within the kind of dark, deep alleyways of that, there's a lot more.
So that's part of why we brought up the idea of gaming is that there's a form of cyber attack called booting. So it's basically denial of service attack against gaming servers. And it started mostly with online gaming, but it's transitioned to anything and everything on a fee-for-service basis. And what do we know about hackers? What do most hackers look like?
Well... they don't really fit a narrative that we see on TV. You know, you think of the loners sitting by themselves, but we know that there's a variety. There's people that have legitimate skill sets that have just not found a job and needed to make money and turn to the skills that they have. So I think it's a wide variety, and I certainly think with gaming, kids are learning these skills a lot faster than they used to, and so they're able to catch up with the technology and be able to engage in these behaviors that I probably couldn't protect myself from. So... scary things.
I would imagine the social networks play a particular role in this kind of, engagement in delinquency or crime, however we want to call it, especially just with the built-in social interaction with others. And I think, bringing in the crim theory angle, as I always do, I think it's super interesting to think about how this is a particular form of offending that's modified by digital space, right? You can access it and engage in it instantaneously. It removes the role of time and space. And so I think when we talk cyber offending and we're constantly saying, no, it's not as computery as you think it is, I think this is a form that is.
And with booters, it's very interesting, the people who run the services. They sound very innocuous, but realistically, we're talking people who are making thousands and thousands of dollars, and they've become a target for law enforcement repeatedly. You can see multiple investigations over time. But that's the real problem, right? The investigations, the takedowns don't eliminate the problem. They just move to a slightly different platform or change the behavior. There was a huge arrest around what's called Operation Power Off in December of 2024. And there were 27 different people who were arrested in 15 countries. So for booting and stressing to be this big of a business, it's important. It's had this sort of funny sounding starting point, but now we're at a point where it is a good business model for cybercrime. And that's part of why we wanted to bring Asier on with us today, is to talk about some of his work in the space. So let's bring him on. Asier, how are you?
I'm great, Tom. How are you?
Good. It's great to have you on. I've known you for several years, so I'm glad that we can bring you on to talk about your work. I remember seeing you when you were doing your PhD and just thinking, man, this guy is doing awesome stuff, and it's very creative. So tell us a little bit about how you got into studying cybercrime.
Well, it was never part of my plans, to be honest. It was one of the few topics that I wanted to avoid as a student because it felt so intimidating, right? All the cyber-related stuff, everything seemed so technical. But of course, as a criminologist, you realize where crime is going and you want to follow. Otherwise, your impact might be limited in the future. You want to know what are the newest threats, and you want to know how to protect yourself and others against them. So that's how I got initially into cyber, and I started doing some research into victimization, more from the side of social crimes. I started looking at grooming and harassment, stalking, these kind of things. And over time, I think I leaned more towards the more technical crimes, and that's what I currently enjoy the most. Even though I have a social sciences background, I like to look into hacking and DDoS attacks, denial of service attacks, malware, and criminal organizations, and the platforms in which they thrive, and preferably from the side of offenders. So I think I've experienced a little bit of everything within the cyber domain, and also the part of prevention is something that. It's something where I feel I can actually have the most impact, working with law enforcement agencies and developing prevention campaigns. Mm-hmm. That's why I enjoy doing it these days.
It's funny you talk about the intimidation of it being technical, because I think there's a group of research in which you were included that I'd see when I was doing my PhD, and I was like, oh no, I don't know how to do any of that. And felt very daunted by it. So it's funny that we all kind of find our way how to merge those two things.
Absolutely.
Yes, I guess there's always a scarier fish, right?
Yeah, there's always a bigger shark in the ocean.
So I know we've talked a little bit about it already, but can you define booters and stressors for us? I know that's been a topic of your work for a little while. So just in case the audience isn't really aware, can you tell us just a little bit more about it?
Sure. These are web applications that rent denial of service attacks. And you as a user can create an account, register on the platform, choose what kind of attack you want, stronger attack, weaker attack, longer attack, a shorter attack. You can really get any options that you want. You can also decide on pricing, what kind of support do you want to have. It pretty much looks like a legitimate service, as if you were deciding on your subscription plans for Netflix, for example. But in this case, you are purchasing cyber attacks. Mm-hmm. And then when you buy it, you get this little GUI. You get a graphical interface, like an application, where you can fill in the details of your victim, of your selected victim, and then click on attack, and it's happening. It's happening. You are launching this sophisticated cyber attack using the infrastructure that someone else, much more skilled probably much more skilled builds, and you're just harnessing all that potential, even if you don't know any or barely any technical knowledge.
I think that's such an interesting point, because I think the assumption with these more technical forms of crime in their nature is that the assumption is that the offenders are also very technically skilled. And that assumption, I think, is built into some offender research. But so is that not really the case? We're seeing people who just have access to these platforms who can pay for it?
I don't think so. I think we tend to think about the cyber criminal as the loner that Taylor was describing before, with the hoodie, surrounded by all these sophisticated gadgets and devices. Super smart, never gets caught by the police. But in reality, I think the cyber criminal landscape is pretty much a full-blown service industry, where a few actors develop all the tooling, a few others just reuse existing tooling and re-update it and sell it as if it was new to try to gain reputation, these kind of things. But the user base is people with not really high technical skills. And they just rely on stuff that somebody else has done. And they can access this type of tooling in platforms that are increasingly accessible. You no longer need to go to the dark web. Even a lot of platforms are just in the clear web, or you can install as applications in your mobile phone. And then a quick Google search or a quick search inside the platform will already lead you to the first few entry groups, where if you lurk for a while, you will eventually end up getting an invite link, or someone will drop an invite link to a more hidden group or a more hidden forum where you can, if you continue going through the rabbit hole, you will end up getting into the real deal.
So tell us a little bit about how you started looking at booters from a prevention standpoint.
So during the pandemic, and also referring to what Taylor was describing, a lot of people just like her starting gaming because you didn't have much to do. You spent a lot of time at home, and one way of getting yourself entertained was gaming. So a lot of people did that. And this also resulted in grudges inside gaming and in esports competitions, which ended, some of them also ended in cyber attacking each other, taking some servers down, especially for these games in which you can create your own server and open it for friends and stuff, like Minecraft, for example. And then we heard through the police, that the gaming industry was struggling with these types of attacks when they were organizing these esports competitions, and they were also hearing a lot of complaints from the user base, from the streamers that were streaming the games they developed. And they got in touch with the police, and the police got in touch with us as academic researchers, because at that point they didn't really know how to deal with the situation. They had some ideas, of course, but more like the traditional way of thinking of law enforcement is let's just investigate the issue and see if we can get some arrests or identify some people. And to be honest, we also didn't know what to do. But we knew about this operation that the National Crime Agency in the UK did in 2018, 2019, which was deploying online ads via Google to try to reach the potential offenders with the aim of deterring them from changing their behavior. Someone who is interested in conducting a cyber attack, the idea was that by reading these messages, they could change their mind. They will maybe realize that the costs outweigh the benefits, and then change their minds and not pursue that goal anymore. So, building on that idea, we launched our own ad campaign aimed at youngsters that were interested in gaming. So, of course, all the ads need to be tailored to this target audience, which was different from the original one. And of course, we also needed to include some jargon in the keywords that triggered the messages, and some words that were particular to the Dutch context, because this was also a national campaign. And then we, of course, had to evaluate the campaign and with the goal of providing some recommendations to the police, which would in turn provide recommendations to the gaming industry. And we had some very interesting meetings all three partners together, sitting together around the table, law enforcement, private industry, and academics. That was a unique experience for me, very enriching. And I think it was a successful collaboration. For as long as it lasted.
So one thing that really interests me about booters and stressors is inside the world of hacking, right, there's a range of motivations. There's financial, there's revenge, there's all sorts of things. But it seems like with booters, they overlap more than others, right? There's always kind of this financial gain to be had, whether it's knocking down your opponent's stream, right? That's creating money, or maybe it's the actual purchasing of the booter itself off the internet. So could you speak to maybe how you're seeing those motivations that's not the right word. Overlap, that's the word. In some of the motivations behind it, because it seems a very unique form of hacking that has some very interesting motivations.
Mm-hmm. When I started looking into these, the motivation that the gaming industry was talking about was revenge or just having fun, right? Knocking down an opponent from a game to be able to kill it and then boast in a forum or in a Discord channel saying, look, I got you, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think in this particular context, in the context of gaming, or at least in the context of gaming that we were dealing with, the main motivation was financial. It was rather fooling around and having a laugh with your group, with your community, with your fellow players, right? Mm-hmm. But we've also seen that there are some users who use booters to, for example, target universities when it's exam time. So if part of the exam is online, then the university can't actually provide the resources for the students to do the exam, and then they get some extra time to prepare for the exam. Mm-hmm. So in that case, the motivation is also different. It's also not financial motivation. It's different. But I definitely see how someone who initially starts with this more let's say revenge motivation or has the motivation of just having fun. After you know how to do this and you know what the consequences of it and the impact it can have, I think crossing the red line gets easier. Mm-hmm. And maybe you start thinking about it with a different mindset and become pursuing a financial gain. And I think that's a delicate terrain to be walking on, because what starts as a game might end up as the initiation of a criminal career, and then things get serious.
It reminds me of vandalism, right? How we used to talk about offline delinquency, kind of just trying to mess around, raise some rabble. And I know that webpage vandalism is also a facet of things, but that's kind of what this reminds me of, is just kind of trying to cause trouble. Mm-hmm. And so in designing the messages that were part of this ad campaign, how did you all approach designing something that they wouldn't just look at and laugh at and go, okay, sure, whatever, nerds?
Well, we still don't know if that was the case. Maybe that
that's
was
fair.
It's true. Yeah.
Maybe they're just making fun of us, creating memes or something, and in some Fortune channel or something. What we knew from the beginning was the approach that the NCA had used in the UK. So we knew what kind of message they had developed, and that message in turn was developed like that because when you advertise through Google, you have certain limitations of character length and the kind of fields that you can populate. It's not like you have a lot of options of you can't include images, for example, or short videos. If you want to advertise with a video, you might as well do that in YouTube, where you have all the possibilities. But in Google, you are quite constrained. But it's also true that if you are targeting a generation, because these offenders are usually young people, you're targeting a generation that is used to consume huge volumes of information in short periods of time through social media and through streaming. I've seen these people watch videos in plus in times 4 speed or times 16 speed, just to be able to consume more and more and more. So if you want to reach out to this population and engage with them, you need to keep your messaging sweet and short, and also engaging, right? Also, you also have to use the right wording, the right terms. Sometimes use jargon, but you also don't want to sound like a boomer using, using gaming jargon, because that also gets problematic. So it was. We had a lot of discussions. We talked to people from the police. They also, the Netherlands Police is a great organization, at least the unit with which we worked, and they also employed ethical hackers. So we had advice also from people who were really embedded in these communities. What kind of wording should you use? And with that, we came up with this, for examples. Also, there were also psychologists in the police who helped us, and we also had our own preferences, looking at the literature, what kind of messaging could be appropriate. But at first, it was more like trial and error, see what works. And we found out that our messages generated, all of them, more engagement than the average advertising message in Google. So for that part, we were happy with it. Mm-hmm. And it might also be worth mentioning that we also had to keep the original ad by the NCA as a control group to be able to make comparisons, which ad works best, because the NCA used the traditional way of communicating, which was more a deterring tone, and we wanted to bring new forms of communication to the table, because what I said, this target population is different. So that's how we started, and maybe they are still laughing at it.
That's fair.
So what kind of impact overall did the messages have? Did you actually see a reduction in interest or visits to the sites? What can you tell us about the events?
That's I think that's the main point that we were interested in looking at when we deployed the campaigns. What everybody wanted is that these messages would reduce the volume of DDoS attacks that were targeting the gaming industry. And there was previous research suggesting that these ads had an effect in the UK. So we thought, okay, let's try to replicate the study and see if we also find the same thing. And you can imagine that at some point there's a lot of preparation around this type of study. You have to ask for the data to a certain organization, and then you have to sign a lot of paperwork to get data, and then you have the police involved with it, and they are expecting your results. Everybody's so hyped. You've seated in a table with partners from law enforcement, gaming industry, and just yourself, and you feel like you have to deliver something that they are going to like. But what we found is mixed effects of the ads on the volume of DDoS attacks, and this can be for a lot of reasons, but at least I can confidently say that we didn't see that the effects had a clear reduction effect on the volume of DDoS attacks. While the campaigns were active, and we tested this in multiple countries in Europe, with comparing with another group of countries in which the campaigns were not deployed, what we saw is that in some cases the ads would even go up. In other cases, not the ads, the volume of attacks would go up. In other cases, they would go down, and in other cases, they would remain the same. So, definitely not enough for us to make a big claim about the efficacy of the ads as a prevention measure. Mm-hmm. What we also discovered is that the ads are not only good for reducing attacks. They might not be just a tool for prevention. They could also be a tool for investigation, because the ads, by deploying the ads, you are collecting data from the users who trigger the ads, and the users trigger the ads by entering very specific keywords in the Google search engine, and some of these searches you can examine and further analyze. And what we found is that this sometimes led to the exact domain names of active cross-border services that were online, but were still unknown by the police. So of course we collected a list that we obtained from the data and provided it to the police. And a few months later, there was another round of Operation Power Off. I tried to know, I even directly asked, did you guys take down this? Was this list useful for you guys? Did you guys take down the domains that we provided? But I never got an answer. Not sure they can actually answer. But I will keep asking. I want to know.
So you've spoken a lot about how law enforcement, and particularly the law enforcement you've been involved with, has been really helpful. But with these more technical cybercrimes, we tend to find, especially here in the U.S., that police are very hands-off, right? I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to help with that. So I'm wondering maybe if you could speak to, how the police in the Netherlands have been very aware of this type of crime and been very hands-on, and how maybe we could replicate that over here in the U.S. Maybe encourage some law enforcement to be more involved, because it sounds like they have a role in helping.
They definitely have a role. And in the Netherlands, there are specialized units in cybercrime, but to the point that there are units specialized to crime types. So you would have this police unit that is specialized in phishing. You would have this police unit that is specialized in remote access Trojans, or have this person that is an expert in remote access Trojans. So when you want to develop a project like this, in which we would want to develop a national prevention campaign, you would get in touch with somebody that you know inside the organization, somebody that you know is, okay, this is the person in charge of the cyber offender prevention squad, which is an actual unit.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
it is. And then they would put you in touch with whoever is relevant, whoever has the right expertise within the organization. Nationally, then you got also this team high-tech crime. And within that is you can find the cyber offender prevention squad that I was talking about. And this squad, for short, COPS for the initials, the COPS are really involved in prevention. So they really use a language that we can understand. Also, as criminologists, right? We get to understand each other very well, and they are interested in the same things that we are. So we talk about prevention, and when we talk about online ads, and when we talk about even concepts like rational choice, at this point they even know what rational choice is and what nudging is, because we've been working together for a few years,
Yeah.
and over time you really get to understand each other, and you also build trust. If let's say they trust you initially. If you over time you deliver, their relationship will strengthen, right? And I was not the one initiating this. Just I want to disclose this. I was not the architect behind all this relationship building. But others before me had a long history of working with the police, with the Ministry of Justice, with the prosecutor's office, and those relationships over time, they really evolve to the point in which they really trust you with some projects, and that's how you can really get into the organization, and they put you in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with. And I guess this is the role that maybe Tom is taking at the moment. He's starting to build relationships, and it will be Rachel and Taylor who will benefit from it in the future.
I know, we're all over here shaking our heads, I think mostly in envy, because I think in the United States we're kind of facing a reckoning of what is the role of law enforcement in cybercrime once we decide how to define it, which is an ongoing issue. And it's just this issue of priority and time and funding. And so I think the model that you've talked about is certainly a goal to hold up, and strive for, just to have that level of collaboration and cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're definitely kind of on a long ongoing road here as to what the role should look like, how to achieve that. But that's amazing to hear what they're getting involved with over there with you guys, and it sounds like a dream.
Yeah, I was going to say, the fact that your officers have the ability to even engage with some of these technologies, right? How many times have we talked to cops where they're like, a mobile device? Like, that's the extent of what I consider cyber. And so it's fantastic to hear that there are ways to go about investigating cybercrime, right, from those unique perspectives. And we in the U.S. tend to, like you said, not even consider it as its own entity, right? But then
it's very much a federal angle. We don't really see it at the local level.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we have a very broken down law enforcement, and so at the federal decentralized. There's the word. And so that can make it really hard because we have so many different states interacting with people. We talk about going over international lines. Right now, I have to get other countries involved, and I think our policing just isn't quite that diverse yet. And maybe providing more civilian opportunities within law enforcement might be a way to answer that call.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be a great idea. It is also but it's also fair to note that in no way can the Netherlands, the tiny country that the Netherlands is, be compared to the United States. So I can understand that the challenges each country faces are unique. What I also like about the Netherlands, and it's also something that you just mentioned, is that they open the door for personnel that are not trained police. Mm-hmm. They're also open to include some civilians as analysts or these persons, for example, as ethical hackers. So I think that helps to strengthen the role of the police. It is very difficult to develop expertise in-house all the time. Sometimes you have to outsource. And if you can't outsource, you can create this particular job for somebody who has developed their expertise somewhere else to just come and join your organization and provide with that expertise that you're lacking, right? So it's way better to open the door for somebody, and of course, you will have to do all your clearance stuff on that new person, make sure that it's trustworthy. But what I see here is that it actually is resulting positively. Sometimes I think that law enforcement organizations are just too scared of opening the doors to the public, or even to the option of collaborating with civilians. And I'm not sure that's the best way of doing it, because criminals won't hesitate to incorporate a facilitator in their ranks. They will just find whoever is able to provide with the best tooling or the cheapest or the most efficient, whatever, and then they will include in the group, and they will start doing things that you won't be able to counter because you won't have the expertise. Mm-hmm. So I think police forces also need to adapt to the new landscapes.
So we've talked a lot about policing, but given a lot of this was driven by collaboration with industry, how did they feel about taking an overt role in trying to reduce a crime problem like this? Is this something they were okay with? Was there hesitation?
I think at first they were very open to it, and they collaborated pretty closely with us. What I sensed was skepticism. In that our little experiment, our little online ad campaign would actually do something. Maybe they were right. But this is something that I've noted not only with the gaming industry, but also with other service providers. They are very skeptical that academics who are not even working with us will be able to help us in any way that we don't already know. Mm. And this is a challenge, and I'm not sure how really to address that.
I'm just mulling over that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, because they do have all of the resources, right? And when I think of internal cybersecurity teams, right, that have access to proprietary data and methods and money, they're kind of outpacing us, but the goals are different. So yeah, how do you present this kind of objective scientific goal as attractive to a monetarily motivated private entity?
I think it is important to find common ground to some extent. Of course, you would think, all right, we are working to reduce the volume of attacks that these people will have to handle or deal with. So they probably will be happy to have that out of their table and and having all the people who we don't even need to pay for actually do the work, and then we can perhaps, maybe they even have some useful recommendations you don't know. But what I perceived was, this skepticism. And to be honest, it bothered me because I thought it was unwarranted. At that point, we didn't even know if it worked or it didn't. But it's almost like we didn't even get the chance to prove it. So I think there are some barriers that we need to overcome before even doing the actual work, at least for next time. And this is something that I've been thinking about. But like I say, besides trying to find synergies in the work we do and trying to make things as easy for them as possible and showing that you carry the bulk of the work, this is an issue that I think we should be thinking about.
I think too, like, what comes to mind is trying to convince them that it's worth evaluating, right? That these are things that you shouldn't just throw out. Because what comes to mind is in Fortnite, unfortunately, that's my go-to example, right? They have these saving screens where it's like, don't share your password, do not click on things, right? Like, embedded into, you're going to be sitting here waiting on a screen anyways, may as well give you some information. But has anyone ever evaluated that? I doubt it. And so I think, like you spoke to, that skepticism is hard because we're trying to help you. We're trying to do things that can benefit both academic, right, the literature, and move it forward, but then also help these companies to answer questions that they have. And if things are being done that aren't being evaluated, well, is it just them checking a box to say, yep, see, we did our part, we educated our people? Or is it actually having an impact on these people that are using the platform? I don't think there's an answer to that, but...
And evaluation probably looks very different in the private sector than it does for us, right?
Absolutely.
And can we make the argument that our approach to evaluation is any more worthwhile for them? And, drawing the offline comparisons, we're talking about crime. And so thinking about, kind of a comparison for where else private companies are taking their own efforts to address crime, I think of like loss prevention.
Yes.
Right? And that's entirely internal. People constantly talk about if a store is being robbed, they're instructed not even to call the police, you handle it internally. And I think that's a problem that's developed out of a long history of, divided police priorities, especially here. So are we at the point where maybe if we can make a good enough argument to the private sector, we can get our foot in the door and say, hey, rigor and the scientific method is important, or do we accept we're going to be on the outside looking in?
No, I think you raise a valid point. And the thing that you said, the way evaluations work in the industry is not like the things that we do, and we try to sell rigor as well. As academics, as social scientists, we want to sell rigor. Look, if you really want to test this, you will have to do it this way or that way, and for this you will need an experiment. But guess what? You want results tomorrow, but experiments take a lot of time. You need to set up things, you need to sign agreements. There's a lot of stuff around data management plans and ethics applications, and for them this is something that they don't really care about. And this is more in general with any stakeholder. If they are not used to working with academics, they will want results soon, and sometimes you can't deliver as soon as they want. So I think a key aspect here is to set expectations upfront and be honest. Don't overpromise, because then at some point, okay, you got the job initially, but then after a while they will realize, and maybe in the future they won't contact you again. So I think it is important, clear communication and setting expectations. That's and usually that means that they will have to wait longer. Well, let me pause here for a second, because that's in theory. In practice, sometimes what we've encountered is that we actually have to wait for them in order to deliver, because sometimes they have to give permission or communicate with somebody high up in the hierarchy, and that takes time. And they have then questions, and they get back to you with doubts, and you have to address them. And you are ready to go. You're ready to launch the experiment, but until this little thing is settled, and then you have like the final little fix for your experiment, then you can't go on. and sometimes we have to wait for them.
So is the legal
okay,
department,
I think I go back on my own words and I say no. Sometimes it goes both ways. Sometimes they have to wait for us. Sometimes we have to wait for them.
Is it then a worthwhile pursuit to try and do? Are we spinning our wheels and trying to forge that bridge, or do you, as an individual scholar or your experiences with your, various projects, is it worth trying to make that work?
I think it is. I think it is the only way of conducting certain research. It's the only way of knowing the answer to certain questions. Otherwise, we can do our own thing and come up with some sort of answer to some sort of question that nobody really asked. And then you think you have part of the puzzle, but in reality, that piece is not from that. It's not even from that puzzle. It's from some other. I think for some questions, it's not only a recommendation to collaborate with certain stakeholders. It is a need to collaborate with them to get the right answers. And in the case of prevention or developing prevention campaigns, or especially evaluating interventions or evaluating prevention strategies, it is necessary to work with the people who are implementing the strategy. Otherwise, it's just not doable. I don't think it is.
What would you say is the one biggest takeaway that you have from this particular project? What would you want everybody to know, regardless of what position they're in, whether it's industry, law enforcement, academic, just an average person? What do you think people should know about the work that you've been doing here?
If I take into account everything, the main takeaway would be that cybercrime is not about hackers, that cybercrime is a service industry, and as such, if you want to fight cybercrime or counter cybercrimes, you will need to counter the industry. And the industry is built around trust. So if you want to counter cybercrime, you will need to develop the tools and collect the expertise necessary to disrupt the trust that cybercriminal groups, organizations, communities are building and are based upon. And in that way, you might achieve some impact. And I'm talking you about stakeholders in general. So that would be the way. And one way of doing that is pursuing meaningful collaborations with key sectors, not just, I'm not talking about just the usual collaboration that you have with the colleagues that you trust, that you've been working with 20 years ago. That's not, sometimes it's not enough. You need to find the expertise that you need, and that might mean that you have to open the door for new organizations, for new individuals, for new types of expertise that you hadn't considered. You might need to rethink your whole approach because the threats are also evolving, and as an organization, you will need to adapt. Because even if we don't like it, crime is an arms race. And as you develop prevention measures, cybercriminals will find new ways to overcome them and commit crimes anyway. So you will have to chase them, be in a position in which you can try to anticipate some of the threats, but at the same time, be ready to react when new threats appear, to be able to keep up, to try and keep up.
That's great. I like that cybercrime is an arms race. That's a great line.
That's a good one.
And I think it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about it as its own economic system, I think, is really important because it is, especially in this case, it is a business. And how do we disrupt a quasi-legitimate business in a way that makes sense?
No, this was fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I'd love to have you on again the next time you have a big project that wraps up. It'll be interesting to see where you're at.
All right. Also something on hackers, by the way. That's what's occupying my time right now. I might have something for the Human Factor Conference. I'm pretty hyped about it.
Nice.
What is it? Can you give us a little preview?
No. I want
Say
to.
less.
Yes.
Keep us in
Let's
suspense.
keep it mysterious for now.
All right.
Perfect.
That's fantastic. Well, good. That gives us a whole other reason to do another episode with you. So
Exactly,
we can
yeah.
crack the mystery.
I'm saving some of my cards.
Well, I'm so glad you could come on with us today. It was great to have you. Thanks to all of you who are listening. We appreciate it. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you smash that like button and hit that subscribe and the notify bell so you know what we're doing next. If you're listening to us on one of the various podcast feeds, make sure you subscribe so that way you're always aware of the next episode that's coming up. And we look forward to seeing you the next time we cross the firewall. Thanks for listening to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. This is a production of the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, produced by J.J. Thomas. The thoughts and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the university. If you have a comment or a question about the show, please email us at crossingthefirewall@gmail.com. Also, make sure that you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for more information. And if you're enjoying us on your favorite podcast app, please make sure that you like the show and leave us a review so that way everybody knows what we're up to. And if you're listening in on YouTube, make sure that you like us and subscribe so that way you're staying up to date on everything that is Crossing the Firewall.